As an automotive enthusiast, I don't like hybrids. And here's why. To me, the car is more than just an appliance. It's an emotional object. When I spend money on a car, I want it to make me feel special. I want it to provide some extra value to me. When I get into a hybrid, I don't get that sort of feeling. The continuously variable transmission makes the engine sound like it's got a bad case of gas. The regenerative brakes makes the car feel like they're being stopped with blocks of wood. And usually the design is frumpier than I looked last weekend. What's wrong with this? Hybrids take the emotional aspect of a car and reduce it to an equation, an appliance, something you do take from A to B and no more. Hybrids also tend to be heavier and more complex, with parts that are shipped from all over the world, which in themselves use gasoline for transport. But hey, enough ranting. And what is that? This is the new Ford Fusion. But not just any Fusion, it's the Energi version, which is either Ford pretending to be French or there is a massive typo. Either way, it's what they're calling the plug-in hybrids. A plug-in hybrid is essentially a normal hybrid, which is a gasoline engine mated to an electric motor, but with an electrical plug that allows you to charge the battery. What this means is that you can charge the car up and drive it off the battery like an electric vehicle. When the battery runs out of juice, the gasoline-driven engine starts up and it runs like a normal hybrid. So what I want to do here is I want to see if Ford has succeeded in making a desirable plug-in hybrid. So not to be shallow, but let's start with the Aston Martin-like grille. But there's no denying it. This is a good-looking car. It is sleek and it looks upscale. So good job there, Ford. So overall inside, it's a pretty high-quality feel to the inside of the car. It feels very much Volkswagen-ish level. So there's a lot of soft touch plastics inside. The seats are nicely trimmed with leather. And for the most part, you do have some nice finishing touches. You know, some of the door handles are fully aluminum, so I just feel it got that high quality finish to it. So I've bemoaned the driving experience of hybrids before, and this car is not that much different. So, you know, this car also has a CVT, which, you know, keeps the engine into its optimal rev range to make the engine as efficient as possible. So when you're driving with the engine, or it's just a constant hum where it just goes all the time, which isn't the greatest sound in the world. And then there's the brakes. Like most of the hybrids I've driven, these brakes also have regenerative braking. So what it does is if you're braking slowly and gradually, it'll actually turn the motor backwards, which will send current going back into the battery. Now the problem with that is they tend to make the brakes feel rather wooden, so you don't have a lot of brake feel. This car is really quiet. Ford's done a good job isolating a lot of the noises that you would normally hear from the outside, from the inside the cabin. So if you have a lot of screaming children at home and you have a lot of people screaming at you at work, the last thing you want is to get into a shouty car that yells at you all on your commute home. But this car will be good for that. It's quite refined, it feels smooth, it feels like you're kind of wafting along in your own kind of world. And that's an extra level of refinement that you probably wouldn't have seen from Ford a few years ago. So I applaud you for doing that, Ford. The chassis was designed in Europe, and it really comes across that way. So the steering feels really tight, you know. There's not a lot of slack. If I wave the steering back and forth, the car moves right with me, so it's quite precise. The car overall feels fairly tight. It handles quite well for an eco car on eco Michelin tires. So that's definitely some good aspects of this car.
The car combines a 2-liter Atkinson cycle engine making 141 horsepower with an electric motor making 7.2 kilowatt hours to make a combined 188 horsepower, roughly. Essentially, this car uses the electric motor on startup of the vehicle, and if you're backing off or cruising, the engine only turns on if the battery is low or the motors need some extra assistance. One main difference between a plug-in hybrid and a conventional hybrid is that you can drive this car in electric mode only, using battery power alone. Charging this vehicle will take 7 hours on your standard conventional plug, or if you can find a charging station or 240-volt source, that will reduce the charging time to 3 hours. Note that you can't use an extension cord with a supplied charger cable, so you better hope that your outlet isn't too far away. After charging for 7 hours at work, I found that I only got 22 minutes of city and highway driving, which roughly translated to 10 kilometers.
So in this car, I also have adaptive cruise control as well as a lane departure assist program. So basically what it does is it takes a look at the lines that you have on the road, and if you are veering out of the lines without signaling, the car will actually steer you back into your lane. And with the adaptive cruise control, you can set how far away you want the car in front of you to be. And so theoretically, the car can sort of drive itself on a highway. So I'm now going to drive with my hands off. I've set the radar guided cruise control, and I'm just going to veer it into the other lane. So it's steering back for me. Getting a little close. So that's cool.
On top of this, there's also the optional parking assist, which I'm sure everyone has seen on the commercials already.
Just like that. And we're done.
Instead of a conventional handbrake, this car comes with an electronic parking brake instead. But can the car still do a handbrake turn? And for those of you who thought you didn't have enough customization options on a typical instrument cluster, well, this car is your dream come true. I'm not sure I've ever seen this many options to look at how the car is using its power.
Now there's also a coaching system in this car that kind of tells you or encourages you to be more efficient with the way you drive. So one of them kind of is a braking coach. That's probably the major one. And that will tell you how efficiently you're braking or how much energy you're recapturing using the regenerative braking function. Generally, I found that the more gradually you braked, the more energy you're able to regain. And so that was kind of cool, and you kind of learn that because the car tells you these things. And then on the right-hand side, you also have what they call efficiency leaves. And the more efficiently you drive it, the more these leaves on this plant grow. And the more aggressively you drive it, the more they die or fade away. Now this sounds kind of stupid, but if you're driving a plug-in hybrid, frankly, it's a fairly boring car to drive. So what Ford has done is they've found a way to turn this kind of into a game. So it encourages you to try to make the leaves grow, and it just makes the car a little bit more interesting. Because I'm watching this plant live or die, it's like Tamagotchi from your car. So the people who are going to be looking for this car are going to be looking for a mid-size car with a mid-size kind of space. And we've established that it's a fair amount of space in the front and rear seats despite the sloping roof. But what about the trunk? Oh dear.
These are the lithium-ion batteries, which unfortunately take up a majority of the trunk space in the back. I still ultimately feel that the plug-in hybrid isn't the be-all, end-all solution to the use of hydrocarbons. The use of electrical energy to power electric vehicles will be debated, as the production of electricity can in itself be polluting in the case of coal burning, which still makes up 39% of electricity generation in the US. Charges don't last long enough, batteries take up extra space in the vehicle, powertrain systems become heavier and more complicated, and the driving dynamics still leaves something to be desired. However, what Ford has done is bring plug-in hybrid technology to the masses. This is no longer a science experiment, and with the hybrid feature, you essentially have an electric vehicle with no range anxiety. Throw in an interesting design, quality interior, and lots of tech, and Ford has built a plug-in hybrid that everyone has access to.
To kind of answer the question that I started this whole thing off with was, has Ford made a desirable plug-in hybrid? I think they have. I mean, you look at it, it's got those influences of Aston Martin. It feels comfortable and clean inside. You just feel like there has been some thought put into this car. And yeah,